on the game between Piy-SONG from Thailand and Yan-Song from China. These are two exceptionally strong players. Piy-SONG is a multiple world champion already. I think he's won it twice. He's on the right. Despite what the text says at the bottom, I will get that changed. Shortly.
There's a reason why I'm in the commentary box. They're playing at the World Championship, so I probably will be wrong most of the time. I'll try my best anyway. So let's take a look. Check with the rule.
Okay. So, as I was saying, Piy-SONG has won the World Championship twice. The last time was a couple of years ago, and Yan-Song has been one of the strongest players in the world, but hasn't managed to make it to all of the World Championships since he has become so strong. And he has certainly been one of the favourites in previous World Championships, and it wouldn't be surprising if either of these players actually won the tournament. So it's the reason we've chosen this game to watch, and I think it will be an exceptionally exciting game. Both of these two players also has a certain style that they play. Yan-Song often dictates the direction of play by taking unorthodoxly a large number of discs, but on one side of the board. So what you see here is Yan-Song with a large block of discs on the outside, which would normally be a bad thing, but he does it so carefully and in such a way that he's trying to force Piy-SONG to play through on the right-hand side. When I say right-hand side, I will be talking about what is showing in the live Othello screen in the bottom left of the picture, rather than the camera on the board. And so I missed the very beginning of the game, so I didn't see the opening that was played, but Piy-SONG, who is black, is pulling towards the top left corner, the A1 corner, and Yan-Song tried to give him the edge. He tempted him to take the edge, and Piy-SONG didn't take it. Instead, he played B3. So now Yan-Song needs to decide whether he's going to take the left edge or not. The advantage of taking an edge is that you gain a move. You take a move that doesn't really mean your opponent gets any new moves too easily. The disadvantage of taking the edge is that it can sometimes later be sacrificed against, and it can sometimes get in the way of what would otherwise be quiet moves where you don't flip many pieces. If you've got an edge, then sometimes it means that you flip in directions that you don't want to, in lines that eventually terminate in that edge, and it can cause you problems in the endgame because you can lose control. In this case, I think it would be very dangerous for white not to take the edge. just because if you imagine him not taking it and playing anywhere else, he hasn't got many moves because of the block that he's taken on the right-hand side. So if he doesn't take the edge and black does, then he is going to be forced okay, he hasn't taken it. So I need to reassess what I was thinking, because both of these players are stronger than me. But the way I see it at the moment is black is pulling very, very strongly towards the top left. And if white's not careful, if white hasn't really thought this through, which he will have done, then white is in danger of running out of moves. And although it's quite likely he'll be able to find a sacrifice in the top left, what I mean by sacrifice is allowing, playing a white move that allows black to take the corner, but only in such a way that white gets something else, a wedge and then a whole edge and another corner, if black's taken the the left-hand edge. But what Piy-SOng will be doing at the moment is he'll be trying to, there's not many moves for each player. Well, black has a lot of choice, but if he's trying to keep pulling to the top left-hand corner, there's not that much choice. White really doesn't have much choice and is starting to be forced to play towards the top left. So what Piy-SOng will be doing at the moment is trying to work out a way if he can play a real forcing line. So white, Yan.htm doesn't have many choices, and can Piy-SOng use that to his advantage to force Yan.htm to play in the top left corner in such a way that he doesn't get much back. Okay, and so now Yan.htm has actually taken the edge. And he also has the tempo at A7. By tempo, I mean, again, it's another edge move. It's a move that really doesn't give black any extra choices. Of course, black could play G1 and take away that A7 move. But that would leave black with an unbalanced edge at the top. And by unbalanced, I mean not symmetrical. So it will be sticking out towards one corner, which could give white the opportunity to play in the top left, sacrifice the corner, and force his way into the top right corner. An example of that would be if black does play G1 immediately, which I don't think he'll do, but if he does, then white could play B2. That's called a stoner trap. And the idea is that because white would have the B2 to F6 diagonal, black would not be able to take the corner immediately. And if black doesn't take the corner immediately, white can also play C1, which, if bearing in mind that G1 has been played, after playing C1, white is threatening to take the H1 corner and the whole the top edge. And the only way that black would be able to stop him is to actually take the C1 piece by playing B1. But obviously this would now flip the B2 move that was the first of this sequence. And so that would be, that's what we call a stoner trap. So for that reason, I don't think that black will play G1, but he will still be thinking about how he could maybe play out another area of the board and get G1 in later, because white, as I said, doesn't have many moves. Possibly G4 is a good move now. Instead of keeping pulling towards the top left corner, it will mean that white would need to it would leave the white wall along the bottom edge intact. White would be able to take a7. A7 is always going to be a nice move for white. But if black can keep applying the pressure, black's applying all of the pressure in this game. But it is the kind of position that Yan-Song is actually very good at. You know, he builds these blocks knowing that if he can live and force Piy-Nat to play through, then Piy-Nat's position could collapse very quickly. And Yan-Song is surprisingly patient at creating positions where he looks ahead and he knows that he's going to be able to force his opponent to play through. So this is a kind of critical moment for black, having to decide how the game's going to continue. And he's chosen to play through now. Now, this is often something that happens where there's big walls of one colour, and you don't have to play through immediately. Black didn't have to play through immediately then. But if you know that you're going to have to play through eventually, it's worth thinking to yourself, well, I know that I'm going to have to play through this now, so or I'm going to have to play through this wall eventually, so what's the best way of playing through? Do I play out something else and then play through, or do I play through immediately? Piy-Nat in this case has chosen to play through immediately, and that means that, well, I mean, he thinks it's better than playing out any other area of the board first. And it was the moment in the game where Piy-Nat was deciding on which direction the game was going to go. And it's turned into a more conventional game now, which by that I mean the big white wall is no longer there. White still has his a7 move, may not play it immediately, but he doesn't want to lose access to it. F2 is the only white disc that still gives him access to a7, so he'll be careful not to lose that, but at the moment that's not particularly scary because G1, as we've just discussed, leads to a potential stoner trap, and G3, which is the only, well, G2 is an X square, one diagonally in from the corner, which allows white to immediately take the corner, so that's would be dismissed very quickly if you looked at it. G3 for black is the only other move which takes the F2 disc. So, and that also flips F4. So there's no reason to take A7 immediately, and indeed he's chosen not to. He's gone to F7 instead, just flipping the one piece, keeping things quiet. And if I was to offer my personal opinion on this position now, I would say that white is actually looking relatively comfortable. There's a lot of lines that can still cause problems and access difficulties. But white has a7 to come. So even if black plays and takes the c6 disc in some way by playing d7 or c7, white has a7, and then black has to play through the wall on the right-hand side, the white wall down the right-hand side. And when he does, then it will be difficult for him to do so in a decent way. Okay, so black has indeed played d7. And white is now looking at the board and thinking to himself, well, okay, if I go to a7, what can black do? What is black's best way of playing through the wall? it's unlikely that white would want to play anything else down on the south edge, because maybe after a black move, then he's going to be flipping a lot of discs because of the edge that he took on the left-hand side. If you remember, towards the beginning of the game, I mentioned that a disadvantage of taking the edge is that it poisons other moves. So that left edge now gets in the way of any of the moves for white along the bottom. So F8, for example, flips a lot of discs and gives quiet moves, and D8 flips a lot of discs. So what both players are looking at is the best way for black to play through on the right-hand side. Okay. So Song has played C8. One natural response to this would be E8. That would be a pair that would leave the board essentially untouched, except the addition of those two pieces, C8 and E8 on the bottom edge. In this case, because white has got the left-hand edge, which will get in the way of, as I said just a second ago, get in the way of white's moves along the bottom edge, I think that black will probably play D8. Because if white then takes the edge, he takes the whole of D7, C6 and B5, which just seems to give black a bit more control in that corner. And I think the reason that Yan-Song is being hesitant in taking A7 is because if black takes G1 and the stoner trap that we talked about earlier becomes available, then black gets quite a lot after taking the A1 corner, because he can get all the way down to the A8 corner. And yeah, so Piy-SONG has indeed played D8, which, as I say, I think it's a strong move, because white would like to take that bottom edge, but it does flip diagonally to the left-hand side and doesn't leave a nice position in the bottom left corner for white to play out. It also means that with D7, F7 and D8 all being flipped, black will get some nice moves as he plays through on the right hand side. So Yan-Song has actually decided to play A7 now. So now if G1 is played by black, the stoner trap is not available. The reason it's not available is because if white plays B2, he no longer has the B2 to F6 diagonal. So black would be able to take the corner immediately, leaving two squares, B1 and C1, and white can't get the wedge, and black also gets the left edge. So the stoner trap is now no longer available. That doesn't mean it wouldn't become available later, but more immediately, A7 means that black can't take G1 immediately anyway. So again, it might become available later. So black doesn't really want to take the bottom edge either, because it's unbalanced, it's sticking out. White gets to choose where to play. It's just quite an easy move to dismiss. Black no longer has G1, so he is now going to have to play through white's wall on the right in a relatively ugly way. So the question is now, black cannot take the bottom edge because white will play E8, and black will either have to flip the whole of the F column in stopping white take the A8 corner, or allow white to take the A8 corner, and then the A1 corner, and save the A column as well. So that's really not a no-go. So black has to play through on the right-hand side. So the question that Piy-SONG is asking himself is, what is the best way to play through this wall on the right-hand side? And it's a very difficult decision because a lot of the moves look relatively similar in value, and there'll be subtle things that make the difference. And I wouldn't be surprised if Piy-SONG takes a while thinking about this. He's normally a very quick player. He plays openings that he knows a long way, and he knows the strategy, how to turn those openings into winning games. So very often you'll find he plays very quickly. But he is taking his time here. He's actually taken 3.5 minutes longer than Yan-Song, who's only taken 10 minutes so far. But okay, so against my better judgment, Piy-SONG has chosen to play B8. Which is really interesting because, as I said, if white does play E8, black either has to flip the the F column in its entirety, which would be bad, or allow white to take the corner. So what Piy-SONG must be thinking here is if he can play out that bottom left corner in such a way that the white wall remains intact and white then has difficult play afterwards. So for example, if white does play E8, forcing the issue somewhat, black could play B7. And then when white takes the corner, black can play C7, getting the last move in the region and leaving the whole of the wall on the right-hand side. So black will have given up the bottom left corner, the whole of the left edge, and half of the bottom edge. But it will mean that white has his huge wall on the right-hand side. He can't play anywhere at all on the right-hand side, and it would be his move. So he would then need to play in the top left-hand corner. And there's various ways in which that could be played out, but most of them, what he would try and do is try and find a sacrifice in the top left-hand corner. There's 5 moves there. So what Yan-Song would be doing is if it goes down that line at all, is he'll be trying to find a way of playing out that top left corner so he gets last move in there, which should be possible because there's 5 spaces, so it will go white, black, white, black, white. And it would also mean that if the bottom edge has been played out first, then G1 becomes available again to black because he'll flip the B6 disc. And if white does take the corner, he'll also flip another one on that line, the C5 disc. So black will have his access back to G1, but if white can play out the odd region in the top left corner, then white will get the last move there, which means although black will get the corner, white will have the wedge and then will be able to take the H1 corner and that whole edge. So white may, if white looks through all of that and then makes a judgment call, that it's not good, then what he'll be looking at is the bottom edge and saying, okay, well, is there a different way in which I can play that out? For example, F8 or C7. C7 doesn't look good because black can just go to E8. And it doesn't really gain white anything. F8 would probably be followed by the perfectly quiet move of C7. By perfectly quiet, I mean only flips internal discs. So Yan-Song has decided to start playing out the top edge. And the reason that he can just about get away with this at the moment is because black still doesn't have access to G1. So even if black takes B1 now, G1 is not available to him. So white would play, it would go from here, B1 for black, and then C2 for white. Black would not have access to G1, so would have to play through the wall, which again has been Yan's plan all along. If he can get black to play through in an ugly way, then white gets to start choosing nice responses, or every black moves gives white good responses if black has to play through in an ugly way. And so what Piy-SONG will be thinking about at the moment is, do I let white take this top edge, or do I take it? So do I play B1 now and take the edge and keep up the pressure, allow white to play C2, and then try to find a way to play through the white hand wall? Or do I, for example, play C2 now? Because if white takes the top edge, then black can sacrifice with B2. And again, by sacrifice, I mean give the corner away. But if you imagine white, so black going to C2, white going to G1, black going to B2, white going to A1, then black gets the last move in the region, B1 gets the whole of the top edge and into the H1 corner. That's not to say that white will take the edge even if black offers it. But it's the kind of thing that black will be looking at the moment. And again, Piy-SONG's taking his time. And this is it is really a very tight game. If black has the control at the moment, but if he is forced to play through, he has the bottom edge, and if he he's certainly got pieces on the top edge at the moment, so he's going to flip in all sorts of directions. And white should be able to take control if he plays through. So black has control at the moment, but if he can't find a way to play through nicely or get onto the diagonal to allow him to play G1, then white should end up taking control later in the game. So I think he might play C2 here. And yes, he has played C2. And so now what he's done is he's refused the top edge, and he's offered it effectively back to Yan-Song, saying, I'm not going to take that edge. but if you want it, you take it. But as I said before, if white does take it by playing g1 now, black will get to sacrifice at b2. Okay, so Yan.htm has chosen to take the edge, and immediately black Piy-SONG has sacrificed, as we discussed. That has the added advantage also of flipping the b3 disc, which gives him access on the diagonal to play g8, which he didn't have previously. g8 would be a good move because it would leave an even number of spaces on the bottom edge, so it becomes what's called in Go a miai if white plays one of them, black plays the other. And so the moves are flying in right now, and I'm watching them on the board and then watching it transfer to so we had a moment ago, maybe about 10 minutes ago, where both players were thinking very, very deeply about the direction of the game and how it was going to play out. They don't know exactly the moves that they wanted to play to the end of the game, but they were seriously thinking about what they could do, and you could tell from the speed at which the last number of moves had played that Yan.htm had thought it through to this point. So taking the top edge, allowing the sacrifice, playing out the two obvious moves, one each, and then making another sacrifice down at g7. He did thought it through to this point. And the game pauses again as Piy-SONG now considers what to do. He's in complete control here. White, if it was white's move, white would only have a choice of 3 squares, and they're all pretty bad. So, for example, if it was white's move, A1 allows B1 and then H1. So white would end up playing B7 as well and giving away that edge. So white really doesn't have a nice move here at the moment as well. There's obvious replies that easily win for black. So but unfortunately for Piy-SONG, it's actually his move. So he has to decide what to do to keep up that pressure. And he's played g3. So he's now played through the white wall that we've been talking about. And he's chosen to do it at g3. But notice that all of his moves, the reason Yan.htm could play g7, so to people who don't kind of understand why sometimes it can be good to play an X square. First of all, he didn't have much choice, but he knew he didn't have much choice and he knew he was going to end up playing it. So why was he okay with doing that? Well, the reason is because even if black takes the corner, he doesn't have access to h7 immediately. He can't build on that corner immediately. And any other moves that black plays on the right-hand side will flip pieces along towards that bottom edge. White will almost certainly go to g4 here. And then black will have to find another move on that right edge. So I don't know the exact order of moves that Piy-SOng is thinking about, but he's going to take the corner quickly, and he does. So this is, I think, looking very strong for black now. It's difficult to see how, because of white's lack of choice of moves, and the even region in the top left and the even region in the bottom right means that white really doesn't want to play in either of those first. He wants to be able to leave those to the end of the game, so they go black, white, and then white gets all of the discs associated with the last move in the region. So he really wants to leave those, but he doesn't have many choices elsewhere either. And in playing elsewhere, he's allowing black to build on that corner that he has in the bottom right, and it's difficult to see how white can get enough discs elsewhere. So it's quite likely that white will play out a lot of the board now just to get the last moves in the top left and the bottom left. But in doing so, black will just get so many discs. So, depending on how confident Piy-SOng is at the moment, he may even be thinking about how to maximise his discs. You know, what is the best move from here? Is it h5 or is it h7? H5 leaves an even region. Well, it doesn't have to stay like that. White might be able to. So if he plays h5, then white could play h4, which opens up black move into there again. Okay, and Piy-SOng has chosen to play h3. So normally at this stage in the game, white is looking to play parity. That means find the odd regions, play into them, and get the last move in those regions. The difficulty is that the odd region is accompanying his own edge. So if he plays into the odd region, then he gives black the corner. So white is just trying to find a way to get the last move in as many regions as possible to try and save a number of discs. As I said, I can't really see how he can do that. But I imagine that it will be some combination of at some point playing g2, allowing black to take the h1 corner, and then taking a tiny wedge at h2. And he's gone to h7. And black just building on his corner. And so when we start talking about stable discs, we mean discs that are not going to get flipped back ever. So it's quite obvious that the corner never gets flipped. It's then obvious, if you follow on the logic, that the discs next to the corner, so in this case h8 being the corner, never gets flipped, h7 never gets flipped, h6 never gets flipped. They cannot be flipped anymore in the game. They're called stable discs. And black is building a block of stable discs that will not get flipped back. And that was actually really interesting from white, because what you will now notice is that the f3 to c6 diagonal is all white. So although black has a lot of stable discs, the even region in the top left and the even region in the bottom left are likely to go black, white, which they were likely to anyway. So this is the sort of position where both players should really be able to count to the end of the game. And so Yan evens up all the regions, ready to take the last move in each of those regions. And he'll just follow black around the board now. And white is going to win. And that was very nice from Piy-SOng. The thing that I missed was, and I don't know how he saw how early he'd seen it, but was the taking of the diagonal from f3 to c6. So it made a very nice game, a very educational game where black was applying a lot of pressure. White didn't have many choices, but white played in such a way that black eventually was going to have to play through. It seemed like he was going to give up too many discs, but managed to also get a diagonal, which allowed him, meant that black didn't get the edges that he was hoping to get along the top. Anyway, a nice game, and we'll be back afterwards for the next round.